This is a series of videos that I will make going over the basics of cancer biology. We will talk a little bit about the history of cancer research, the very first cancer paper, and then the hallmarks of cancer. What exactly makes a cancer cell a cancer cell? How is it different than a normal cell? What makes it behave in that uncontrolled manner that we know about cancer? So to start with, you would notice that I have all these cute little pictures up on top. Well, they're not just there to be cute, they're there to a little bit tell you about the history of cancer biology. Cancer is not a modern day disease, even though we many times think of it as such. It is actually a disease of any living organism. So we can go back all the way to the dinosaur time, and you can find in those fossilized dinosaur bones evidence of cancer. So it is not, like I said, a modern disease. It has been around for a long time. So even in that time, without any so-called modern day chemicals and carcinogens in the environment, there were still things present there that would cause cancer in the living cells. Why is that? Is what we will talk about later in this video. So the first knowledge that we have of cancer in humans is all the way back in 3,000 years before Christ, and that is recorded history for from the time of mummies in ancient Egypt, where they can see evidence of growth suggestive of bone cancer as well as cancer of head and neck, and we can see evidence of these both in the mummies themselves as well as in fossilized bones that we have found from that time. So at that time, it could be that the chemicals that they were using for the process of mummification made the people that were exposed to those chemicals more prone to cancer, or maybe it was something else in their environment that made it more prominent in that particular society compared to the remaining world. However, there is definitely a large set of evidence that that shows tumors, especially those of the bone and head and neck, from the time of pharaohs in ancient Egypt. The first research article that we can actually look at is from 1600 years before Christ. This is the oldest description of cancer, and it is what you would call essentially a research article, because not only are they describing the cancer, but they're also trying to describe a treatment for it. So in this particular writing that was translated by Edwin Smith, there is a description of 8 cases of tumors or ulcers of the breast that were tried to be cured using a tool called the fire drill. So essentially a process of cauterization that is still used today in modern day medicine as well, to prevent bleeding, to stop bleeding, to block particular sections from of a tube or a capillary or a vessel from seeping out or doing other spreading infection. So it is used in many different applications even today in modern day medicine, but that's the process that they did. However, at the end of the day, the writer talks about how even with these treatments, while the cancers were reduced or somewhat became quiet for a while, they did not go away, and in the end they did start to aggressively grow again, leading them to believe that there is no treatment to this disease. So what is cancer exactly anyway? Cancer is essentially a genetic disease that starts from our own body cells becoming dysregulated or deregulated. Our cells are supposed to grow and divide and work in a very regulated manner normally. And when that regulation, or one of those signals that regulate these cells to signal them to divide or not divide, goes missing or gets mutated or something happens to it, then you are becoming more prone to cancer, and that is how cancer arises. Cancer in modern day society is the second leading cause of disease in Western countries. There are 1 million new cases per year just in US alone, and 500,000 people die from this disease each year. A long time ago, at this point, about 30 years ago, Nixon had declared war on cancer, trying to find a way to make better judgment about treatment option as well as diagnosis for this disease. We have come a long way since then in understanding the genetic basis of cancer and in trying to develop better treatment options. However, there is still a long way to go before we are able to truly conquer this disease and make it treatable for all age groups and for all types. So cancer at the end of the day is a genetic disease, as I mentioned. It happens due to genome alterations, mostly in the somatic cells and not in germ cells. The germ cell mutations are very, very few. They only comprise about 1% of total cases that we see. And that's the one that would be inherited risk for the disease. Majority of the cancer that arises because one somatic cell gets a particular mutation in a very critical gene that controls an important function that is responsible for regulation of cell cycle and cell growth. These cell functions that are particularly important for this disease to happen are related to DNA repair, cell division, apoptosis, telling the cells when to divide, how to divide, when telling the cells that it's too damaged or too old to continue to live, and targeting it from programmed cell death or apoptosis, fixing issues when they arise, whether it is due to DNA replication or because of environmental carcinogens or mutagens. Anytime that happens, there's supposed to be genes that regulate DNA repair pathways, and those are the genes that many times get mutated and thus lead to cancer down the road. Other genes that might be responsible for mutations in which can be responsible for cancer involve cell differentiation, as well as genes and proteins regulating cell-cell contact and communication signals. So these 5 main pathways or sets of pathways are what we study and look at when we are trying to understand the biology of cancer and how it becomes the aggressive disease that it is known for from a simple normal cell. So just like I said, it is a disease where a somatic cell in many cases has gotten mutated, and now a cell is going to be not regulated and thus can cause cancer. However, having just one of this mutation is not enough. Rarely do we have a case where the mutation is in such a strong or such a important gene that it will lead to cancer just with that one mutation. It is usually a more progressive process. So it is it is when you acquire multiple mutation over the course of several years or decades that you have the cancer phenotype appear, not just a single mutation. Many times we see people showing up with lung cancer who are smokers, showing up with lung cancer in their 50s or 60s. However, those mutations didn't start when they were 50 or 60 years old. Many of those had the first mutation start when they first started smoking or within the first 5 years of it, and only later in life does it show up as a cancer phenotype, because that one single mutation was not enough on its own. However, it did mess up the regulation enough to make it more prone or give it a higher chance of acquiring further mutations that will eventually lead you down the road to cancer.